Hey everyone, in this video we want to spend a little time talking about autophagy, which is one of the buzzwords out there in the nutrition and the alternative health circles. And we kind of really just wanted to focus in on this idea that you need to do extended fasting in order to get the benefits of autophagy within the body. And I guess to start, what is autophagy?
It is cellular cleanup.
Cellular cleanup.
It cleanups damaged cells.
Okay.
Cancer cells.
Cancer cells, damaged cells, dysfunctional proteins.
Yeah, everyone's scared of cancer right now, so it's promoted a lot for to avoid cancer. Like, you're not going to get cancer if you fast, right?
Yeah, it's like the cleanup service of your body. To kind of make an analogy, I'm sure that anyone watching this spends at least a little time cleaning up their house or their apartment or wherever they live. Because if you don't do that cleanup, you start to accumulate junk, dust, garbage, and that's what autophagy does within our body.
In our body.
Every second as new proteins are made, some of those proteins are dysfunctional and they're completely useless. And cells die and cells become dysfunctional and useless. And autophagy is just our natural way of breaking down these cells and dysfunctional proteins and recycling what we can salvage from them and disposing of the rest so that we don't have things like cancer cells pop up from mutations and dysfunction.
So what causes autophagy in the body?
The number one regulator of autophagy is cellular energy balance.
So that's how fasting works then.
Yeah, because when you fast, your cells need energy because you're not eating. They aren't getting that energy. And
so where are they getting it
so
when you fast?
What happens is within the cell, the cellular energy currency called ATP, it begins to drop. And the ATP precursors called AMP and ADP, those begin to rise. And when the AMP-ADP to ATP ratio increases, you start to see the activation of this protein kinase called AMPK. And that is ultimately what starts to activate the cellular processes that lead to the breakdown of nutrients like glucose and fatty acids and proteins to get the glucose and fatty acids and amino acids from those compounds
for energy
to enter into the cell so that they can use them for energy. It's also what stops the cell from doing things like reproduction. And, that plays out in what happens to us too. When people are starving or fasting for prolonged periods of time, the body perceives the environment as being hostile because there's no food. So it begins to shut down reproduction, begins to shut down protein synthesis because your body is more interested in conserving what it has and making it last as long as possible, rather than trying to grow new tissue and develop offspring. And so that's one of the reasons why fasting is seen as like, yeah, if you want autophagy, you need to fast because it tells your body to start breaking and recycling and conserving things. But you don't need that to happen.
What do you mean by that?
So you
could be in, what would you say about like an athlete that's in an energy deficit, but
they're
not
having
fasting?
Autophagy. They are having autophagy.
Even if they're not fasting?
Yeah. You could eat like food every 10 minutes. You could eat a small piece of food, right? A small piece of, better yet, small piece of carbohydrate, like 10 grams of starch for that insulin, plus pure isolated leucine that would stimulate mTOR. And you could eat that every, I don't know, like 10 minutes. And so throughout the day, 24/7. But all that you eat amounts to only 500 calories and you burn 2,000 to 3,000 per day. You're going to have massive autophagy going on. Your cellular energy deficits are so strong that ingesting a small amount of nutrition isn't going to inhibit anything.
And autophagy, are the catecholamines high when that's happening too?
They can be, yeah. Especially in the beginning. When you first start fasting, you have an enhanced sympathetic response because your body isn't going to just go, oh, we're fasting now, better just start shutting things down. Its initial response makes evolutionary sense. It stimulates you to have more energy so that you can go out and hunt and collect food. It doesn't want you to just sit around when you start fasting. It wants you to go get food. Yeah. And that's why you see people tend to, when they first start fasting, they're like, oh, I have a lot of energy, a lot of mental clarity, I feel great. They're just running on, yeah, they're just running on catecholamines, and that's going to go away after like 4 days. It only lasts for about the first 3 days.
Is there studies discussing that?
Yeah, there are. And there's also research in athletes kind of demonstrating the power of the cellular energy deficit.
I'm asking because there's nutrition camps that think that you should eat constantly around the clock, even wake up while you're sleeping, to keep your catecholamines low.
Oh, that's just ridiculous. Catecholamines are not inherently bad, and they serve a natural purpose.
And I'm just wondering if they still get autophagy if they're eating around the clock.
If they never let any other growth factors like insulin return to baseline and they aren't eating in an energy deficit, then they're going to be getting very little. And that's one of the issues with obesity, is that there's some researchers hypothesize that obesity is characterized by a chronic autophagy deficit. And that's one of the reasons why obesity predisposes individuals to like numerous types of cancer, as well as dysfunctional mitochondria, because the chronic overnutrition and energy poisoning of obesity leads to low levels of autophagy. They have too much growth signaling going on.
Yeah, so it's a balance that you want to achieve, correct?
Yeah, that's
between
correct.
Growth and restriction, right?
Yeah, the best way to look at it is we evolved to operate on a diurnal scale, right? We're
catabolic at night.
Yep,
right?
Exactly. We go to sleep at night naturally. So we evolved to have a period of autophagy, cleanup, and catabolism overnight when we sleep. And data seems to indicate that 12 hours overnight is probably the minimum to obtain benefits. Those studies are done in men, correct? Because I know women have a lot more issues with fasting. Mostly men, protocols. Yeah. Mostly men. And women, depending on their hormonal cycle, they might need to take different approaches. Kind of like an infant's a good example of this. Infants wake up in the middle of the night crying to eat, and they don't follow any circadian pattern. They just eat. And that's because if you look at a sedentary adult, they're burning like maybe 12 calories per pound of body weight. Just to put this in perspective, if you look at a newborn infant, well, not newborn, but like a 6-month-old infant, they're burning, I want to say, 195 calories per pound of body weight. Like, just to give you an idea, obviously that's not very many calories because they're so little, but that's huge relative to their size because they have such high energy demands for growth that, they're basically like in autophagy. Yeah, so what you do when you're a baby is not what you want to do as an adult for longevity. Yeah, babies, if you don't feed an infant, after about 2 hours, they start to see a dramatic rise in blood ketone levels because they get into such an energy deficit so quickly because their energy requirements are so high. And frankly, that's what happens in humans too. If you're doing a hardcore diet and you eat a meal, like if you just eat 1 or 2 meals a day, but you're in a severe energy deficit, what you're going to see is you're going to see a small amount of growth for like 1 to 2 hours after you eat. And then boom, you're right back into autophagy and catabolism because your energy demands are just so ridiculously high compared to what you're eating. So for cancer, they say that increased stress hormones, it's not they say, like there's studies that show that high stress hormones lead to the cancer being metastatic, right? But autophagy is essential too. So how would you strike a balance? How would you recommend people strike that balance? I think it just comes back to respecting your circadian rhythm and the diurnal cycle of feeding and fasting. Like we're literally, yeah, we can go prolonged periods of time without eating. But that's surviving. That's not thriving.
Yeah.
And we're designed to have a fasting window overnight. Ideally, that's a minimum of 12 hours, but I would say upwards of 16 to 18 hours, depending on what your goals are.
And I think females have a lot of problems when you push 16 to 18 hours.
Yeah.
They seem to do better with around 13.
And so in that remaining 6 to 12 hour window that you're not fasting, you should be eating.
I think,
so you have your period, you alternate your periods of growth so that your body starts putting down new tissue, building new proteins, and then cleanup so that any dysfunctional proteins it accidentally makes and any cells that die off during that time get cleaned up and you have a fresh start. Muscle hypertrophy for like bodybuilders, studies in rodents, if you remove their ability to break down muscle tissue, then they can't grow new muscle tissue. Like muscle protein breakdown is absolutely essential.
So you don't want to get up in the middle of the night and have those protein shakes?
No, you don't. Yeah.
Bananas.
Yeah, so you don't need to fast for prolonged periods of time to get autophagy. You just need really a cellular energy
What are your
deficit.
thoughts about long-term fasting, like for 3 days?
I mean, context. I don't want to just like poo-poo on it because it really depends why someone is doing it. But as far as body composition is concerned, prolonged fasting is completely detrimental.
And why is body composition important if health is my only goal?
Well, body composition is intimately tied to health. Now, I mean, if you're like severely obese, then yeah, fast for as long as you want, as long as that's what allows you to lose your fat. But if you're already, but if you're already at a relatively healthy body composition, prolonged fasting is not ideal because the data is really clear that it causes the breakdown of muscle tissue after just 1 day. And that's because just because you're fasting doesn't mean the rest of your body's taking a break. You need to have amino acids on a continual basis.
And so it'll break down your muscle tissue and your organs and your bones.
Yep. There's essential and non-essential aminos, right? Your body can make the non-essential, but it can't make the essential. And all of them are needed to build proteins to maintain organ function. And so where does your body go first to get the essential amino acids? It breaks down your skeletal muscle. And skeletal muscle is absolutely critical for metabolic health. So if you're already at
low muscle mass is...
Oh yeah, one of the main killers. Sarcopenia is the leading cause of death for older adults due to increasing the risk of falls and fractures. So yeah.
So extended fasting isn't beneficial in that regards.
Yeah, exactly. Extended fasting, you're going to lose muscle.
And you're not going to be enhancing your health when you go overboard.
Yeah.
There's a happy medium there.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, well, that's it for today. Give us a like, share, subscribe.
Thanks.
Thanks.